Exploring the bizarre world of alien worlds. The year was 2125, and humanity had reached a technological crossroads. Space exploration had advanced far beyond the Apollo missions, and vast interstellar ships now cruised the galaxy. But as humanity ventured deeper into the cosmos, they encountered something they hadn't anticipated: alien worlds that defied all logic, pushing the boundaries of physics and biology in ways never imagined. Commander Ava Larkin stood at the helm of the Odyssey, a state-of-the-art exploration ship designed to investigate distant planets and uncover the mysteries of the universe. Today, she and her team were about to land on a planet that had intrigued scientists for decades. Known only by its catalog number, PSY-89, this planet orbited a dying star on the far edge of the Nebula X quadrant, and its atmosphere was filled with unusual electromagnetic readings that had baffled astronomers. The first transmission they received from PSY-89 was a series of strange geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with energy, but when they tried to decode the message, it turned into an abstract array of colors and sounds. No one knew what it meant, but the message's repetitive nature suggested intelligence. As the Odyssey descended through PSY-89's thick atmosphere, Ava could see the surface below, a kaleidoscope of shifting colors and surreal landscapes. There were no typical landforms like mountains, valleys, or oceans. Instead, there were liquid clouds suspended in mid-air, floating islands tethered by strands of luminous energy, and forests of metallic trees that pulsed with an ethereal glow. Gravity fluctuated in strange patterns, so the crew had to adjust their personal gravitation boots to avoid floating away at random intervals. The first step onto the surface was a disorienting experience. The ground seemed to ripple like liquid, though it was solid beneath their feet. Small, floating orbs, almost like jellyfish made of light, buzzed past, humming in a harmonic pattern that resonated through their bones. Ava shivered, not from cold but from the strange sensation of being both grounded and weightless at the same time. "Commander," called out Dr. Elias Zane, the ship's lead xenobiologist, his voice cracking with excitement. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen." Ava nodded. The bizarre landscape didn't seem to obey the normal laws of physics. The plants were crystalline and refracted light in prismatic patterns, casting shifting rainbows on the ground. Some of the flora seemed to move of their own accord, not just bending in the wind, but shifting and growing in real time, as if responding to the crew's presence. "The flora appears to have some kind of adaptive properties," Dr. Zane continued. "It may be reacting to our energy signatures." Further investigation revealed that the planet was alive in ways they hadn't expected. Beneath the surface, the planet's crust was a network of sentient nanostructures that communicated through bioluminescent pulses, weaving patterns of light that spoke a language far beyond human comprehension. But the oddities didn't stop there. As the crew ventured deeper into the alien wilderness, they encountered other phenomena that defied explanation. At the edge of one glowing river, the water shimmered with an iridescent sheen, but when touched, it melted into the air, leaving no trace. In another area, trees had leaves that seemed to whisper, not with sound, but through intricate vibrations that traveled through the air like telepathy. The trees were communicating, but not with the humans. They were communicating with something else. And then came the most bizarre discovery: a massive structure, buried beneath the surface, that seemed to be constructed out of organic material and pulsing energy. The shape was like an enormous spiral, twisting inward, its surface shimmering with what appeared to be fractal patterns. "This," Ava said, her voice low and reverent, "this is no natural formation. This is artificial. Someone, or something, built this." As the crew explored the spiral structure, they began to decipher more of the strange patterns in the atmosphere. The air itself seemed to hum with an unnatural frequency, and at the center of the spiral, they found the source: a massive, crystalline organism that seemed to be both alive and aware, its translucent body vibrating in response to the crew's presence. It was an alien intelligence, one that had been waiting for them to arrive. Zane attempted to make contact by using the ship's quantum translator, but the results were perplexing. The being didn't communicate through words, but rather through feelings and patterns of thought, overwhelming the crew's minds with waves of abstract emotions. The being didn't seem hostile, but neither did it seem to care about the crew's presence. It was ancient, its mind vast and incomprehensible, stretching across eons and dimensions that humans couldn't even begin to understand. It existed in a state of perpetual flux, its consciousness spread out across the planet, interacting with its environment in ways that were both biological and quantum. "We've stumbled upon a living planet," Ava said softly. "A sentient world." But even as the crew marveled at their discovery, something darker loomed on the horizon. The planet wasn't just alive, it was sick. The electromagnetic pulses were growing more erratic, and the structures around them were starting to destabilize. It became clear that the planet was in a state of decay, its once vibrant energy slowly frittering away as its star approached the end of its life cycle. "We need to leave," Ava said urgently, her voice cutting through the mounting tension. "This place, it's dying." But before they could return to the Odyssey, the crystal organism pulsed violently, sending out a shockwave that knocked them to the ground. For a moment, everything went dark. When Ava regained consciousness, the alien landscape was gone. The sky was dark and empty, and the ground beneath her feet was cold and lifeless. It was as if the planet had momentarily folded in on itself, a transient dream that had slipped through their fingers. The strange patterns of light were gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. "Commander." Elias called, his voice distant. Ava looked around, heart pounding. "We're not alone," she whispered. But the crew was gone. The Odyssey was gone. The universe, as she had known it, had slipped away into something incomprehensible. The last thing she saw before everything faded to black was the colossal spiral, now a shimmering ghost of its former self, receding into the folds of spacetime. The bizarre world of PSY-89 had given up its secrets, and with it, perhaps, a glimpse into the true nature of existence itself, and so, the universe remained, full of worlds that defied understanding, each one a unique enigma waiting to be explored. But Ava Larkin's encounter with PSY-89 would forever remain a reminder. The cosmos was not a place to be conquered. It was a place to be understood, and sometimes, in the process of understanding, humanity would have to let go of everything they thought they knew. Part II Commander Ava Larkin awoke in darkness. At first, she thought it was a dream, a lingering echo of the surreal encounter with PSY-89. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized something had changed. The air around her was thick and charged, like the calm before a storm, and her senses felt distorted, as if she were floating between dimensions. Ava blinked rapidly, trying to focus. The last thing she remembered was the violent pulse from the crystalline organism, the shockwave that sent her spiraling into unconsciousness. And then, nothing. It was as though time itself had stopped. She sat up, feeling a strange weightlessness in her limbs. The ground beneath her was cold and metallic, and when she reached out, her fingers brushed against a smooth, hard surface, like glass but alive, pulsing with some strange internal rhythm. Slowly, she stood, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. The alien world, the shimmering landscape of PSY-89, had vanished, replaced by a shimmering corridor of light and shadow. The walls around her seemed to ripple, like the very fabric of space itself was bending and twisting. She could hear faint whispers, like voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand, distant, and yet somehow inside her head. "Commander, are you there?" A voice crackled through her communicator, snapping her out of her trance. It was Dr. Elias Zane. Ava clutched the communicator, her voice coming out hoarse and disoriented. "Elias. Where are you? What happened? Where's the crew?" There was a brief silence before Elias responded, his tone strained. "I don't know. I woke up in a similar place. It's like we're inside the planet itself. I think we've crossed into another layer of reality. I don't know how to explain it." Ava's heart skipped a beat. Inside the planet. Something happened after that pulse, Elias continued. It's like the world shifted. Everything's different. We're not in the same place anymore. I've tried to contact the ship, but it's not responding. Ava took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. If they were indeed in some kind of alternate reality, inside the planet's very consciousness, then they were no longer dealing with the physical world as they knew it. This wasn't just a planet with a strange ecosystem. They had stumbled upon something far deeper, something that transcended conventional understanding. She pulled herself to her feet, orienting herself with the strange hum of energy around her. The shimmering walls seemed to pulse with an inner glow, changing color as she moved closer to them. They weren't just walls, they were alive, vibrating with what felt like thought, as if the space itself was aware of her presence. I'll find you, Ava said, her voice steady despite the creeping uncertainty in her chest. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. She began walking, her steps slow and deliberate, as she moved through the twisting corridors. The walls around her began to shift, their colors morphing from pale blues and purples to deep oranges and reds. It was as though she was passing through the layers of a dream, each one more strange and unfamiliar than the last. Minutes, or perhaps hours, later, she reached what could only be described as a chamber, a vast, open space filled with floating fragments of light. They moved like shards of glass, shifting in sync with an invisible rhythm. At the center of the chamber was a massive orb of pulsing energy, suspended in mid-air, its surface constantly in motion, swirling with colors that shouldn't have existed. It was the heart of the planet, the consciousness that had once inhabited PSY 89. But now, it was fractured, broken, its glow fading. Ava could feel it, the planet's pain. Its decay was not just physical. The life force of PSY 89 had been drawn into this strange pocket of reality, where its essence lingered, tethered to something beyond space-time, a place where the laws of nature no longer applied. Commander, Elias's voice came through her communicator again. I'm at the edge of the chamber. You're not alone. There are things here. Before Ava could respond, a soft hum filled the air, and she felt the temperature drop. The lights around her began to flicker, and something moved in the shadows. It wasn't a person, nor was it anything even vaguely humanoid. These were creatures of light, strange, fluid forms that shifted and morphed as though they were made from the very substance of thought itself. They floated in and out of existence, barely visible, like reflections in water, only to vanish again when she tried to focus on them. Her breath caught in her throat as one of the creatures moved toward her. It was almost graceful in its motion, but the feeling it emanated wasn't peaceful. It was intense, like a mind trying to communicate with her directly. A feeling, an overwhelming sense of knowledge, flooded her mind, but then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished, leaving her with the lingering sensation of its presence. Ava's pulse quickened. These beings weren't hostile, but they were aware of her. They had been watching her, and they were trying to reach her in ways she couldn't yet understand. Commander, I see you. Elias's voice broke through again, this time with more urgency. You need to get to the center. The heart of this place. It's where the energy is concentrated. If we don't do something, this entire reality might collapse. We'll be trapped here forever. Ava hesitated. The idea of returning to the orb, to the heart of this dying consciousness, was daunting. But it was their only chance. She had to reach the source of the energy before it was too late. With a steady breath, Ava began to move toward the center of the chamber. As she approached the orb, the creatures of light seemed to react, swirling around her, their movements frantic now, as if they sensed something was about to happen. They pulsed, their light flaring in warning. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the orb's surface. The moment she touched it, a flood of visions crashed into her mind. Her consciousness was stretched, pulled, fragmented across dimensions. She saw the planet, PSY 89, vibrant and alive, its forests of glowing metallic trees swaying in the breeze, its floating rivers shimmering with energy. She saw the alien intelligence, vast, incomprehensible, a consciousness that spanned the cosmos, touching the fabric of space-time itself, but then, the vision darkened. The planet began to wither, its core cracking open, its energy fracturing into chaotic pulses. The once living world was dying, its mind unraveling as its star grew unstable, and then, in the final moment of clarity, Ava understood. The planet wasn't just a victim of natural decay. It had been chosen. Its mind had been pulled into this state of stasis, its consciousness forced into a prison between realities. The beings of light were its memories, its residual echoes, trying to hold on to the essence of a world long gone, but there was still hope. The pulse of the dying planet had opened a rift, and if they could reach the heart of it, if they could stabilize the energy, they could repair the tear in space-time, set things right, and perhaps give the planet a second chance. But doing so would come with a cost. Ava took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She could feel the pull of the orb, the strange power it held. The creatures of light were gone now, leaving only the hum of the energy, and, somewhere deep within the recesses of her mind, she could feel the presence of Elias, waiting. Together, they had one chance to fix what had been broken, but would they survive it? Part Ayava's hand trembled as it hovered above the orb's shimmering surface. The energy thrumming from it wasn't just physical, it was mental, almost as if the planet itself was calling out to her. She could feel its desperation, its fading will to survive, and in some strange way, it felt like it was reaching for her to help it, to give it a final chance to exist. But with that thought, came the terrifying realization, this wasn't just about saving the planet. It was about the very fabric of reality itself. The tear in space-time, the flickers of light and shadow, the creatures that had seemed to exist in the cracks between worlds, these were all symptoms of something far larger. PSY 89 had been a conduit, a bridge between dimensions, and now it was unraveling. Ava's breath was shallow as she tried to steady herself. If she failed, the collapse wouldn't just claim the planet. It could tear open a rift that might spread beyond PSY 89, stretching across the fabric of reality itself, fracturing the very laws of space-time. And they would be trapped here forever, lost in the chaotic ripples of an alien world's dying thoughts. She stepped closer, her mind racing. We have to act now, she whispered to herself. But the uncertainty gnawed at her. How could she fix something she barely understood? The orb pulsed again, almost as if in answer to her thoughts. For a moment, the chaos of shifting dimensions stilled, and the world around her seemed to fall silent. And in that moment of quiet, something shifted within her, like a connection clicking into place. Ava realized that the answer wasn't in force or calculation. It was in attunement. She had to sync with the planet's consciousness, become one with its ebb and flow. A voice broke through the stillness, a mental whisper so faint that it felt like a thought buried deep within her own mind. Help US.IT was the planet. The intelligence of PSY 89. Ava's heart clenched. I'll do what I can, she said, though she wasn't sure if the words reached the planet, or were just a thought in her head. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to try. She closed her eyes, reaching out with every fiber of her being, connecting herself to the orb. As her fingers made contact, the world around her warped, stretching into impossible angles. Time seemed to fold in on itself, and Ava felt herself falling into an infinite void of shifting light and color, her body no longer tethered to the physical plane. For a heartbeat, she was lost, but then there was clarity. The landscape of PSY 89 opened before her, vast and alive, but not in the way she had seen it before. It was as if she was inside the planet's consciousness now, floating through its neural pathways, its vast network of living energy. The trees, the rivers, the floating islands, they weren't just biological forms anymore. They were nodes in a living brain. The planet itself was thinking, dreaming, existing on a level beyond comprehension, Ava felt a surge of energy, raw, chaotic, and beautiful, as she became attuned to the flow of the planet's life force. But there was pain too, dull, agonizing. The planet was dying, its essence tearing apart under the strain of its decaying star and the rift in reality that had opened around it. "Help us, heal us," the voice echoed again, louder now, filling Ava's thoughts. It was a plea, but it was also something more. It was a collective consciousness, a desperate, unified desire to survive. And in that moment, Ava understood, the planet was the rift. The collapse of its energy had fractured reality, but the power to mend it lay within its core, within the collective consciousness of every living thing on PSY 89. But the solution was not simple. The planet's mind was tangled in knots, its energy unstable. The only way to fix it, to stabilize the rift and save both the planet and the crew, was to guide that energy back into alignment. Ava had to become a conduit between the physical world and the consciousness of the planet, channeling its energy through her own mind to heal the fracture. Ava hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. It was clear that this would not be without sacrifice. To do this, she would have to merge with the consciousness of PSY 89, to allow its life force to flow through her, to become one with the planet in a way no human ever had. She didn't know if she would survive it, or if the process would even work. But there was no time to second guess. With a deep breath, she surrendered to the energy. The world around her shattered into streams of light, flowing in patterns that only made sense in her mind's eye. Her body was no longer solid, she was fluid, her consciousness stretched beyond herself, tangled with the pulses of the planet. The strange creatures of light, the ones that had watched her before, now circled around her like guardians, guiding her through the currents of energy. She could feel their presence, their awareness of her, but there was no fear, only a sense of harmony. Suddenly, she felt Elias. Through the link she had formed, he was there, his thoughts brushing against hers. He had managed to synchronize his consciousness with hers, a delicate connection formed by the strange bond that tied all living things on PSY 89 together. "We have to focus," Elias's voice resonated within her, calm but urgent. "The energy is unstable, but we can stabilize it. Together." Ava nodded, though Elias couldn't see her. They had to work in unison, their minds merging to create a channel through which the energy could flow. They both understood what needed to be done: align the dying forces of the planet, shift the energy back into equilibrium, and close the rift. It was a task that required both their minds, their wills, and everything they were willing to sacrifice. "Trust us." The planet's consciousness whispered. Together, they began to weave the energy. The current of power surged through their combined consciousness, pulling them into an infinite dance of light and thought. As Ava and Elias focused, the chaotic pulses began to slow, to align. The light began to shift from chaotic flashes into harmonic patterns, and the once dying world began to stabilize. The energy that had been spiraling out of control started to flow smoothly again, like a river redirected into its natural course. But as the power flowed through her, Ava felt herself slipping. Her mind was stretched thinner and thinner, her very being dissolving into the light. The creatures of light, the memories of the planet, pulsed around her, their forms flickering in and out of existence like echoes of a dying dream. Her body, her human body, was becoming irrelevant. "We are one now," the planet's consciousness whispered. "You have healed us. You have saved us." Ava's heart raced as she felt herself being pulled into the heart of the orb, her consciousness merging with the energy, the will, and the life force of PSY 89. She could feel the immense weight of the planet's history, its thoughts, its dreams, and its pain. It was a beautiful, overwhelming sensation, and yet, in the distance, she could still feel Elias's presence, guiding her, keeping her grounded. But as the last pulse of energy flowed through her, something unexpected happened. The rift began to close, not just around the planet, but around her as well. The reality she had been part of was beginning to fade, shifting, dissolving. The consciousness of PSY 89 was stabilizing, and with it, So too was the fracture in space-time, and then, nothing. Ava opened her eyes. She was back on the surface of PSY 89, standing in the vibrant, alien landscape once again. The sky was a calm, deep blue, and the ground beneath her was solid. The planet was no longer dying. The energy was stable, flowing naturally, as if the catastrophic event never occurred. Elias was there too, standing a few feet away, his face pale but alive. They exchanged a glance, both of them silent for a moment. "We did it," Elias said softly, his voice filled with awe. Ava nodded, though she couldn't help but feel the lingering presence of the planet's consciousness inside her. A part of PSY 89 was now part of her, its thoughts and its dreams intertwined with hers. It would never leave her, but for now, the planet was saved. The rift was healed. The journey was complete. They had unlocked the strange mystery of PSY 89, and in the process, they had touched something beyond the stars, a consciousness that spanned both space and time, and perhaps, just perhaps, they had learned that the universe was far stranger than they could ever imagine. Commander Ava Larkin stood motionless on the surface of PSY 89, looking out at the alien landscape now bathed in the soft light of a distant, dying star. The planet, once fraught with instability and near collapse, had somehow found peace. The air was still, the iridescent rivers and crystalline forests no longer pulsed with erratic energy. Everything was whole again, but in a way that was more unsettling than reassuring. It was as though PSY 89 had been reborn, but not quite the same as before. Elias stood beside her, gazing at the landscape with a mixture of awe and suspicion. The energy, the strange pull of the planet, was still there, but muted now. No longer was it chaotic, unpredictable, it had settled, like the quiet after a storm. But Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside her, something irrevocable. She could still feel the faint echoes of PSY 89's consciousness, its dreams, its memories, resonating deep within her mind. "It's quieter than I expected," Elias muttered, brushing a hand over his face. He looked tired, but there was a glimmer of wonder in his eyes. "We did it. But I still don't understand how we did it. The energy, the rift, it shouldn't have worked. You shouldn't have survived it." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly as she turned to face him. His words were laced with the same disbelief she had felt ever since the pulse of energy had surged through her, connecting her to the planet. Part of her still felt like she was floating between worlds, tethered to something that wasn't fully her own. The experience of merging with PSY 89's consciousness had been transformative, to say the least. The flood of knowledge, the depth of the planet's history and thoughts, had overwhelmed her, yet it also felt as though a door had been opened in her mind, one that she couldn't fully close. "I'm not sure I understand it either," Ava said quietly, her voice tinged with a quiet reverence. "But it worked. The rift is closing, the planet's stabilizing." The distant, fading star above them glowed weaker now, but the subtle shift in the atmosphere suggested that PSY 89's energy had begun to realign with its natural cycle. They had managed to prevent the planet from tearing itself apart, and in the process, perhaps they had mended something far deeper, something cosmic. For a brief moment, everything felt too perfect. Then the silence shattered, the ground beneath their feet trembled. It was subtle at first, a faint vibration in the soil, like the stirrings of a giant waking from slumber. Ava's heartbeat quickened, and Elias stumbled slightly, his eyes wide with alarm. "What's happening?" Elias asked, his voice strained. "It's not supposed to." Before he could finish, a high-pitched hum filled the air. It was alien and disorienting, not like the harmonic frequencies they'd encountered before. This was different. It was sharper, more intense, and it vibrated through every particle of air and light. The ground trembled again, this time much stronger. Ava reached out instinctively, her hand grabbing Elias's arm. "Get to the ship. Now." But as they turned toward the Odyssey, the very landscape around them began to distort. The sky flickered like a broken television screen, and the solid ground beneath them rippled as if it were made of water. The crystalline trees bent in impossible angles, twisting and warping. The planet was reacting again, but this time, it wasn't the planet's natural life force. Something was wrong. The energy was shifting, fracturing once more. Not again, Elias whispered, his voice filled with panic. I thought we fixed it. I thought it was stable. Ava didn't have an answer. The sensation in her mind was growing stronger now, alien, familiar, and yet foreign. The presence of the planet's consciousness, once peaceful and synchronized, was now chaotic, disjointed. It was as if something was awakening within it, something that had been lying dormant during their healing process. We have to get to the core, Ava said, a cold realization creeping over her. There's something else here. Something we missed. Without another word, she and Elias broke into a sprint toward the heart of the strange energy field, where they had first encountered the orb. The earth trembled with each step, the air crackling with electromagnetic energy that made the hair on the back of Ava's neck stand on end. The landscape continued to warp around them, as if the planet itself was fighting to remain grounded in reality. As they reached the center of the energy field, the orb was there, still floating in mid-air, but now pulsing with a violent, irregular rhythm. The colors that had once been calming, the soft glow of the planet's life force, were now harsh and erratic, swirling like a tempest, and in its center, a new figure emerged. It wasn't human. It wasn't even biological, at least not in the way they understood life. It was a being of pure energy, its form fluctuating like the heartbeat of a dying star, a massive swirling mass of light and shadow. Its shape was fluid, constantly shifting between forms that seemed to defy any natural law. For a moment, Ava thought she recognized something in its energy, something familiar, something human, but the thought slipped away as quickly as it came. What the hell is that? Elias whispered, his eyes wide with terror. It's not the planet's consciousness, Ava muttered, her voice thick with a mixture of awe and dread. It's something else. Something that was inside the planet all along. The figure, if it could be called that, seemed to see them. It flickered toward them, faster than any human eye could track. Ava instinctively stepped back, but the being reached out, its form coiling around her like a serpent of light. A rush of images slammed into her mind. Vast cosmic landscapes. Stars being born and dying. The infinite void between galaxies. And somewhere in that cosmic swirl, there was a feeling, one she could only describe as hunger. It wasn't just a physical hunger. It was a desire to consume knowledge, to devour the very essence of existence. This entity wasn't a simple alien intelligence. It was a cosmic parasite, a being that had latched onto PSY-89 in its death throes, using the planet as a conduit to siphon the energy of the surrounding star systems, to stretch and grow beyond the confines of its own existence. This thing had been inside PSY-89 all along, waiting for the moment when the planet's death would unleash the rift, and when the rift would open, it would escape. Ava's mind reeled with the implications. They hadn't just healed PSY-89. They had unwittingly triggered the release of something far darker. We need to stop it, Ava said, her voice trembling with determination. Before it leaves this planet. But as she took a step forward, the entity pulsed again, sending a shockwave through the air. The ground beneath them cracked open, and the Odyssey, their only means of escape, was dragged into the rift, spinning away into the chaotic distortion of space-time. It was too late. The entity was free. And it was no longer confined to the dying star system of PSY-89. Ava turned to Elias, his face pale with fear. We've opened a door we can't close, Elias. We have to stop it, or the whole galaxy could be at risk. He nodded grimly. Then we fight. We finish what we started. The battle for PSY-89 had ended, but the true fight had only just begun. The universe, vast and indifferent, held many secrets. But as Ava and Elias stood on the cusp of what was to come, they understood one undeniable truth: in the search for answers, humanity had uncovered a force far greater and more dangerous than anything they could have ever imagined, and now, they had to face it. The entity flickered in and out of existence, its form a constantly shifting vortex of light and shadow. Ava's heart raced as she stood frozen in place, unable to tear her gaze away from it. This was no longer the tranquil, dying planet she had come to know. PSY 89 was now a battleground, a place caught between the life force of an ancient world and the voracious hunger of an alien entity, the being's energy wrapped around her, feeling almost intimate, like a cold, invisible hand reaching deep into her mind, searching for weakness, for any opening to exploit. For a moment, Ava thought she could hear its thoughts, a flood of raw, predatory intent: consume, expand, survive, and then, it was gone, retreating back into the shadows of the distorted landscape. But Ava could still feel its presence, lingering in the very air around her. "We have to stop it," Elias's voice broke through her reverie, sharp and panicked. He was still standing beside her, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. He was trying to appear calm, but Ava knew he was as shaken as she was. The situation had escalated far beyond anything they had prepared for. "How?" she asked, her voice hoarse, almost defeated. "We don't even understand what it is, Elias. It's not just a creature, it's something beyond that. It's not just using the planet, it's feeding off of everything. The energy of PSY 89, the rift, the very fabric of reality itself." The planet's ground trembled again, this time more violently, as if reacting to the entity's growing hunger. The air seemed to thicken, becoming oppressive, and the trees around them bent unnaturally, as though recoiling from the entity's presence. The orb, once a source of hope, now glowed with an eerie, erratic pulse. Its once stable light was now tainted with an undercurrent of darkness. "We don't have much time," Elias said urgently, his mind working through the problem, trying to think of some solution, some way to fight back. "The longer it's free, the stronger it will get. We need to disrupt the flow, sever the connection between it and the planet before it can use PSY 89 as a gateway to escape into the rest of the galaxy." Ava turned to face the heart of the distortion, her mind racing. The rift they had thought they'd closed wasn't a simple tear in space-time. It had been a conduit for something far more dangerous. The pulse of energy they had felt had been the planet's attempt to reach out, to communicate, to warn them. But in the process of stabilizing the planet, they had inadvertently set loose something far worse. Now, it was feeding on the very energy that had once sustained the planet, drawing power from the rift they had hoped to close. "We need to find the source of the distortion," Ava said, her voice filled with a sudden clarity. "The orb, it's the key. It's not just a power source, it's a conduit for the rift itself. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to cut off the entity's access to the energy it's drawing on." "But how?" Elias asked, his brow furrowed. "The orb is part of the planet's consciousness. If we try to destroy it, we might end up destroying the entire planet." "I know," Ava replied, her jaw clenched. "But we don't have a choice. If we leave it unchecked, we risk the entire galaxy. This isn't just about saving PSY 89 anymore, it's about preventing something far worse from escaping." The entity's presence flared again, this time more intense, and the very ground seemed to ripple beneath their feet. The orb at the center of the disturbance pulsed faster, its glow shifting from soft hues of blue to a violent, almost blinding white. It was reacting to the entity's hunger, amplifying the rift, feeding into its power. Ava's mind flashed back to their first encounter with the orb, the feeling of being pulled into the consciousness of PSY 89, of becoming one with the planet's energy. She had felt the connection, the intricate web of life that had tied the planet together. But now, that same energy was being twisted, corrupted by the entity's insatiable need for consumption. We need to get to the orb, Ava said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. If we can force a feedback loop, something to disrupt its resonance, we might be able to destabilize the energy it's drawing on. We need to disconnect it from the rift before it becomes too powerful. Elias nodded, his face hardening with resolve. Let's do it. They didn't waste time with words after that. They moved swiftly through the disintegrating landscape, the air warping around them as if reality itself were beginning to bend under the strain of the rift. The trees, now twisted and warped, reached out as though alive, their metallic branches scraping against the sky. The alien flora had become as unstable as the rest of the planet's reality. It was no longer just an ecosystem, it was a reflection of the planet's deteriorating consciousness. As they reached the center, the orb loomed before them, its energy shifting erratically. The pulse of light from the orb was like a strobe, blinding in its intensity, casting grotesque shadows over the land. Ava's pulse quickened. She could feel it, the pull of the entity, trying to reach her through the orb. The feedback loop it had created was like a tug-of-war between two forces, the planetary energy, fighting for life, and the alien being, devouring everything in its path. The balance was teetering dangerously on the edge of collapse. Get ready, she said to Elias, turning to face him. Once we make contact, we won't have much time before the entity tries to stop us. Elias's expression was grim, but his eyes were determined. I'm with you. Ava took a deep breath and reached for the orb. As her hand made contact, the pulse of energy shot through her, flooding her senses with the planet's consciousness once again. This time, however, it was not the serene harmony she had felt before. It was chaotic, a maelstrom of conflicting energies. The planet's mind was struggling, fighting to maintain its integrity, to hold on to its essence. The alien entity was there, too, pressing against the fabric of the planet's thoughts, hungry, insatiable, but Ava didn't pull back. She gritted her teeth and focused. The orb was the key, the conduit between the two forces. If she could somehow sever the connection between the entity and the energy it was feeding on, she might be able to break the loop. Suddenly, a sharp, icy pain shot through her chest, and she gasped. The entity had found her. Its hunger was now focused entirely on her mind. She could feel it pressing against her thoughts, trying to force its way inside, to consume her consciousness. Don't let go. Elias shouted, his voice piercing through the storm of energy. He was there, beside her, his hand on the orb, adding his own strength to hers. Together, they pushed. The orb's pulse began to slow, the erratic light fading. The entity's presence flickered as its grip on their minds weakened. Ava felt the connection unraveling, the feedback loop growing unstable, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart at the seams. The orb began to vibrate violently, its energy surging as it fought against their control, and then, everything exploded. For a moment, there was nothing but blinding light, a flash so intense that it consumed everything. The landscape shattered, folding in on itself as the rift in space-time collapsed. Ava felt herself being pulled apart, her mind stretched to the breaking point. And then, silence. Ava's eyes opened slowly, her breath shallow and ragged. She was back. Back on the surface of PSY 89, but the planet was no longer in turmoil. The distortion was gone. The orb, now dull and lifeless, hovered quietly in front of her. The pulse of energy was gone. The rift was closed, the planet had stabilized, but something had shifted inside Ava. The memories of the entity, of the hunger, still lingered in her mind like a shadow. She could feel the faintest echo of its presence, as though it was still watching her from the other side of reality. Elias looked at her, his face pale and tired but filled with relief. Did we do it? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Ava nodded, though she didn't feel entirely certain. For now. But I don't think it's over. We've only seen a fraction of what's out there. We've closed the rift, but the universe is vast. And there's still so much we don't understand. The fight might have been won, but Ava knew that the true battle was only just beginning.